All right, let's talk about this. This has nothing to do with anything that we just talked about, but do you have a favorite national championship that your team won? We'll go back and forth on some of these that have nothing to do with the
Oh my
game anymore.
gosh. Can I have a tie? Am I allowed to have a tie?
No, you can't have a tie because
I
both
mean,
of our teams have won
so
three. So,
yeah, but I've had two family members play on two of my three, so
which one
I
do you
feel
like
like
more?
that gives me. So probably Eric's, right? Because Eric was a team captain on that team. He was incredibly. He was an integral part of it. He
So
was
'06 for those that don't know.
'06, yeah, 2006 national championship game, Florida against Ohio State. It was in the Fiesta Bowl, and the lead up to that season, Florida won a basketball national title in 2005. They beat UCLA. And we watched that game at my husband. Now, he wasn't my husband at the time, he was my boyfriend, but condo right on University Avenue. Put a couch in the yard. This is a very Gainesville thing. Watch the game on the TV. And as you watch down University Avenue, as that clock clicked down to 0, all the front doors flew open and everybody poured into the streets. They had blocked University from like 13th Street to right in front of the president's house, so no cars could drive there. And everybody just started kind of pouring into the street and making their way towards Midtown, like where Swamp Restaurant used to be and stuff like that. And as we are walking that way, we're like picking up Eric's teammates. Like we're like, everybody's coming from their own place and everybody's kind of meeting up and moving then as a group. And I just have these like incredibly strong memories of Eric and his teammates looking at each other and saying, I want one of these. We want this. We need to get this. We want this. And that's kind of hilarious because they had played in, I want to say, the Outback Bowl the year before. They'd gone like 7-5 or whatever. Actually, it wasn't 7-5 because there was only 11 games that season, but like let's say 8-4, whatever it was. They didn't have a great season. They had the opportunity to make it to the SEC championship game, but they lost to South Carolina in at South Carolina. So they didn't make it Urban's first year. And so it just, the odds that they were going to make a national title in 2006 were not large, and then this team with this goal, watching this basketball team win a national championship, got to work. And this group of upcoming seniors, which Eric was a part of, held this team accountable, put in the effort, put in the work, held player only meetings, worked harder than they had ever worked in their entire lives. And then we watched it, play out. And there was a lot of close games that season. They beat Tennessee 21-20. It was up in Knoxville, close the entire time through. They lost at Auburn. And part of the reason was that Eric dropped a punt, which has never happened over the course of his career. Eric started every single game of 4 years at the University of Florida. At one point, he held the record for most starts at UF. The only time he ever made a mistake was that Auburn game, and he dropped a punt. It was actually blocked, but I mean, he could have gotten it off and he didn't. It was a mistake on his part. He got leveled. He almost got it off left-footed. They lost that game. They had like a gut check moment in the locker room afterwards. I remember getting a text message. It was like, I don't want to see anybody. That includes you. They basically started to fight each other kind of in the locker room. And after that game, they came out a different team and we watched them, just beat opponent after opponent. Then we get to South Carolina. Eric's roommate was Jarvis Moss. He blocked 2 kicks in that game. We had 3 blocked total, but the one that's labeled like the cock block is the one that is with only a few seconds left. And the crazy thing about that is he was suspended the week before, might have failed a drug test. And he was in the doghouse and he told me leading up to this game, you watch, I am going to win this game. And then lo and behold, this guy with, I'm pretty sure it was like 1 pinky, wins this game. He called his shot the week before it happened, sends us to the SEC championship game against Arkansas, who was just,
Is that like McFadden and those guys?
Yes, it was McFadden.
Yeah.
And then they had the punter who did the like weird yoga pose beforehand. It was wild. They ran a fake punt in that game. Eric had a punt that Reggie Fish for Arkansas bobbles in the end zone. Wandy Pierre-Louis drills him. Ball goes flying. Wandy recovers it. It is, potentially the turning point of that game. And we win. But in the third quarter of that game, before we win, we're in Atlanta and we are watching the ticker because at this point, you don't have Twitter. Facebook is just for college. You're not getting the same kind of up to date for the up to the like stuff on from ESPN like we are now on our phones. And we're watching the ticker across the stadium, and UCLA beat USC. It was a kind of a foregone conclusion that it was going to be Ohio State and USC in the national championship game until UCLA upsets them, right? So that's coming across the ticker, and you can visibly see in the audience kind of the gasps of the crowd as they realize. And then you look down on the field, and the players are realizing the opportunity that is unfolding like while they are playing this game. So they win. You will remember, I believe it was Lloyd Carr was at Michigan. Tressel was at Ohio State, and obviously Urban at Florida. And they each had their opportunity to kind of pitch their story, right? Why they should be picked. Ohio State and Michigan had already played earlier in the year. I believe it was a 3-point game. I want to say it was like 6-3 or something crazy, or 9-6. It was a very low scoring game that Ohio State had won. And Lloyd Carr refused to stump for Michigan. He said, I shouldn't have to do this. They know the stats. They know who belongs in this. And Urban pled our case on ESPN. And, that swayed voters, which then sways this BCS system by the polls changing slightly. And Florida gets in. And then we listen for 30 days as to why Florida doesn't belong in the national championship game. When we got off the plane in Arizona, the amount of Ohio State fans that came up to us and told us, you don't even deserve to be here. They were livid that it was us and not Michigan, and thought there was no chance we would last on the same field as them. And then they ran the opening kickoff for a touchdown. Ken Ginn Jr., I believe, hurts his ankle, celebrating with his team in the end zone, doesn't play another down the whole rest of the game. And truly, after that moment, that was about it, right? Florida had no penalties at halftime. We were one of the most penalized teams in the country going into that game. It was magical, It was really cool, and I will take to my grave that I think that team started the SEC dominance.
I won't be as long-winded as you with my answer, and you're not allowed to be that long-winded when we talk about these next couple. But
all right.
Yeah, so it's tough too. I don't remember 93, right? Like quite a bit younger than you. Right. So
rude. I do not remember the 93 game either. I do remember the 96 game.
So I don't remember that either, being 5 years old. But between 99 and 13, like 99 was cool because it's the first one that I remember, but like going to 2013 was pretty fantastic. And I remember we played Pittsburgh on Labor Day to open that year up, and Pittsburgh drove right down the field and scored and took a 7-0 lead. And there was all this hype, like Florida State had won 12 games the year before, had, they lost to Florida in Doak, had 5 turnovers in that game and still took a lead at one point. And the turnover that ended it was like EJ getting a concussion on a big hit, and even that they were across midfield and driving, and so like they felt like they in 2012 felt like they left something there. They were up 16-0 at NC State and lost 17-16 in Raleigh, and then lost that game with all the turnovers against Florida, and really felt like 2012 was the year to make a run at it. And they were a top 5 team. They had blown out Clemson earlier in the year, and they were good, and just kind of blew it, in a couple of games late. And so 13 Pittsburgh scores on the opening drive, and I remember Twitter was like really new. It started in 2009, but I remember that's like when I first started Twitter, and I remember tweeting like, another year, same crap, like here we go again. And then obviously, everything since then worked out really, really well. But being able to go out to Pasadena and it being in the Rose Bowl and being able to go to it, I know you've been to both of them, but like just going to a national championship is, I don't know. I was talking to somebody about it today. I got in for $300. Like face value tickets were $300 in 2013. That skyrocketed the next year with the playoff. And they went insane. And now the cheapest ticket to get in this weekend is, or on Monday night, is like $2,000. And I'm just like, if it was my team, maybe I'm making some decisions, right, and trying to find a way. But 300 versus $2,000 is pretty astronomical, right? And so, going out to Pasadena, and the way they won too, right? Like they were getting blown out 21-3. They had no shot. They run a fake punt. They get a kick return for a touchdown, and then with all of that, do you give up the lead with a minute 19 to go and for your team to go all the way down the field and win it with 10 seconds left or 13 seconds left is pretty unreal. I told somebody else this. When I bought my ticket, I was in the very last row of the stadium. And as I'm walking in, the scalpers had trouble moving their tickets. I mean, there were two East Coast teams, Florida State and Auburn, playing in it. And I told the scalper, I was like, hey, can you just upgrade my ticket? Like, I got $50 cash. Can you just get me a little bit better seat than the last row? And he goes, I got this one. It's my only single. He's like, I don't even know where it is, but it's,
Not
it's
the
not
last
row, it's not
Yeah.
row 76. It was row 11 in the end zone that Kelvin caught the game-winning touchdown in. So it was the best $50 I've ever spent in my entire life. Just kind of being right there, being really close. The trip was cool. I went out by myself, but I met up with people. I went to a Lakers game the night before. I had in and out like 3 times while I was out there. So it was fun. So 13's my holy grail for sure.
Well,
But 99 was fun too. Wire to wire number 1 champions. But I had a better understanding when I wasn't 9 years old.
2008 would be my runner-up. My brother was a true freshman on that team.
You're not allowed to tell the whole 08 story
I didn't
though.
tell the whole story, but I did sit in the end zone, row 1. That's where they put the player families, starting at row 1. And my brother, his girlfriend, who is not who he's married to now, so we won't mention her name, and Eric and I sat first row. And my brother came over after I'm going to get choked up now, literally crying because he dreamed about that since he was a kid. And, I'm his older sister. So I knew that, I knew that he dreamed about that. I watched him wear a Gator jersey in the backyard and pretend his entire childhood. Our dad played there and our grandfather did. So I know what it means for him to be. At the time, he was only the second, third generation Gator player. Vernell Brown, the third, will be the fourth, third generation Gator player. So that was a pretty cool moment. We beat Oklahoma and that was fun too.
Scott upgraded to a much better.
Did.
I don't even know who it was, obviously back then, but somebody that wears better colors now.
That's fine.
Do you have a favorite Natty memory that's not from your team? I know you'll probably say Bama here, so you could quickly say why. But outside of that, like you're not allowed to use a familial relationship anymore.
But that's what makes my national
All
team.
right, go to somebody else's, like just a fun national championship. Like this was a great
Alabama
game.
2009 is my favorite. They beat Texas. It was in Pasadena. My cousin Colin was their starting tight end. He had a big role in that game. They beat Florida to get there, and he essentially beat Florida to get there. He was the front of Sports Illustrated after that game. I think he had 2 touchdowns. It was ridiculous, but and he wore a Gator coin in his hip pad that both Scott and Eric, my brother and my husband, wore in their hip pad. So you're welcome, Alabama, for your 2009 national championship, because
That's what started Saban's run, honestly.
it is. That's what started Saban's run, and it started Urban's decline. I mean, truly. But I'm trying to think if there's been some fun ones.
I've got a couple. I'll give you a couple, and then if you want to
Tell
pick.
me some of your fun ones.
So I loved USC. Like they were so much fun to watch.
Texas in 2005. Is that what you're saying?
So I was gonna say that one's up there for sure. But 04 with
Bush.
Liner and Bush, like, and they blew out. Like it wasn't even a game, right? Like they won by a billion. I think they won 55-19. But I loved USC that year. Like they were they were so much fun to watch. And they were always on late because it wasn't like it is today. Like there were more like big games earlier in the day, but because they were West Coast, like they were always the 8:00 game, I feel like. And so I watched them so much that year. And so that was a fun one, even though it wasn't a great game. The next year with with Vince Young running in was really cool. And then I loved it felt like we got Clemson, Alabama every year for like a million years in a row. Yeah, but the Clemson game here in Tampa where they scored with no time left, like literally walked just the way that went down. And they had lost the year before. Saban had tried the onside kick and got it back. And that's kind of what changed that game the year before. I'm not a big Clemson fan by any means, but it just felt like they were never going to get over that hump. Saban was always going to come out on top, and to win it to walk it off, winning it was a really cool, to me, that's really neat. Same way that Vince Young did kind of, but even this one, even more so, like they walked it off. There was no time left when Lawrence threw that pass and they caught it with no time left on the clock in Tampa. That one is up there really high for me, just the way it went down. Kind of the same idea with the Alabama one in 2020, where the second and 26, like when you can walk off, and overtime's a little bit different because they had another play. If that was incomplete, they would have had another play. But anytime you can walk off a national championship, Florida State got really close to that, scoring with 13 seconds left. That's really cool to me, and it's just so much drama, and it feels like that payoff. Like you've watched this entire season from August until January, and you get it's like a game-winning shot in basketball. So those are some that I kind of remember.
The 2003 game, the Ohio State Miami game that went into double overtime, that was a cool one. I do USC Texas game in 2005. I guess it would have been the 2006 Rose Bowl, but it was for the 2005 season. Is one of my favorites. We've seen a lot of good championship games. The Manti Te'o one and his fake girlfriend was just great for storyline. I was doing daily drive time radio in Orlando at the time, so that gave me like so much to talk about every single day. It was glorious. And then Alabama, much like his girlfriend, did not show up on the field that game. But there's been some fun natties.
Do you remember when they lost to Nebraska or not really?
I mean, I was 11 years old or 10 years old, something like that. So I don't remember it really well. My dad went to that game and I remember that. And I just remember being so shocked because Florida had looked so good that season. I was a big Danny Werfel fan. Remembered not liking Tom Osborne. I cannot remember. I want to say Tommy Frazier was their quarterback. They had a running back, and now I can't remember his name, but he had been arrested for some kind of domestic violence. And my parents didn't talk to me about it, but I literally read the sports page cover to cover every single day. So that's how I knew about it. So I decided that they were basically like a team of criminals and they had to lose. And my 10-year-old brain. And I just remember that being so shocking. Florida had not been pushed around all season long, and they just got absolutely whipped. And I definitely cried. But I was the 10-year-old that cried about college football, and then the 11-year-old that cried about college football, and the 12-year-old that cried about college football. So, here we are.
The 2001 sucked. Like I don't remember the rematch in the mid 90s at all. I was 5, and so just just like I don't remember 93, I don't remember 95, or 96. But
I remember 96.
The 2001 sucked. Because it felt like it was so obviously going to be us, and to get there, and Rick left early to go to Georgia, and then your offense didn't score. We scored 2 points, and I remember I don't know if it was heartbreaking because it wasn't like a last second loss or anything, but to get there and Oklahoma's offense was unreal, and to hold them to 13 points, and your defense scores 2 points themselves, and so you're really holding them to 11 points. For your offense to not be able to put anything,
or had he not gone yet? Had Stoops just gotten there?
Yeah, that was his one. Yeah, so that was a tough one because it was just so shocking. Kind of the same thing, like when you talk about Nebraska, like it was like, why aren't we moving the ball? Like this should be relatively easy. Like we just scored 1 billion points on Virginia Tech last year, and then they were really good. They made the national championship. That one felt like a shocking one. But anyway, you were playing with house money. That was the 3rd year in a row they'd been in the national championship. So you were playing with a little bit of house money, I guess, at that point. But to score 2 points in a national championship game is pretty awful. So last thing we'll wrap up. Way too early pick for next year. Who's your national champion? We're going to revisit this for sure. But who's your 2026 national champion?
Everything in me wants to say Ohio State, but I think that's based on what we're watching right now. And also will depend on if the rumors are true that they're paying half their roster to stay before they enter the transfer portal. So obviously that could change things as well. I think Georgia gets it together again. And so that's what I'm going to go with.
Yeah, I'd lean Ohio State here. Maybe Oregon can make a run at it, but I'd lean Ohio State. Like it's tough to imagine that they don't have another really, really talented roster that's very, very well compensated, and that they don't go all the way back in. And quarterback play will mean a lot for them. But it's hard to we've talked about this with the SEC. If you gave me the SEC over the field, I might take them, but it's just hard to
Yeah.
we'll probably do a segment on this. Who is the SEC team that's really going to rise up next year and maybe not even be like dominant like we've seen in the past with the SEC, but there were just a lot of, I thought, in the SEC this year, really good teams and no
Yeah.
elite teams. Do we have an elite team next year? And if you
I
told
mean,
me who
but
that was going to be,
we wouldn't have said that the Big Ten had an elite team until the playoffs started, right?
yeah,
I mean,
no,
Oregon,
I agree with that. But like preseason, we would have, and it would have been the team that's probably about to win it.
we
So
barely would have said
um,
12. And if we did, it would have been Oregon.
I mean, say that again.
I said we barely would have said there wasn't only because you said, well, we wouldn't have said that in the preseason or like, but we wouldn't have said it week 12 unless we were only saying
Oh yeah,
sure as hell
no,
wasn't Ohio State who got whipped by Michigan there at the end. Like I don't know that we would have said the Big 12 or the Big 10 has an elite team or more than one elite team until the playoffs. And Ohio State is certainly elite right now. They are playing elite, absolutely. But I don't know. I almost feel like it depends on what point in the season you ask the question, what the answer is.
what I think, and this maybe goes back to what we talked about at the very beginning. What I think it'll come down to is which roster. Because the regular season, I don't want to say it doesn't matter, but it really doesn't matter at this
Don't
point, right?
tell me
Like,
you know
and
that the
so
college
it
purist
it
brain.
come it comes down to who has the best roster to
Yeah.
me. Because who has the best roster over a 3 or 4 game season is most years, or not most years, but
It
a
also
lot
is
of years it is going to look
a
different.
weaker conference is a benefit because your roster is healthier. So,
Yeah.
what you've bought on your roster is obviously key, but how healthy you have kept that roster is a huge component of this. And
And they
uh,
just have more time to get clicking.
yeah,
Like Ohio State's roster is probably going to be about as talented this year
yeah,
or next year as it is this year. And if that's the case, I like them to probably be able to
yeah.
figure it out over a 4 game window or 3 game window. Like they'll probably win the Big Ten next year and get the bye. So, um, all right, that's all I got. If you guys are watching this, if you enjoyed it, if you think we're idiots, whatever, hit the comments and let us know. But I think we're both picking Ohio State and both hoping we're wrong. But thank you guys for tuning in. We'll talk to you soon.
Hey guys, thanks for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed this clip from a peek inside SEC football. We clipped it from a full length episode that we would love it if you checked out. You can go ahead and watch it if you click this button right here.